So in week number 32, or part 3 of our mystery quilt for spring of 2023, we're making the Stars in My Eye Scrappy quilt, and you'll see it here. We worked on block 1, or block A actually, in part 1 of the mystery quilt class, and this was week number 30 for the Scrappy Black class, and then this is block 2, or B, for the mystery quilt class, and that would have been week number 31 of our Scrappy Black class. And here we are now going to be working on our week 32, and it's going to be our borders. And we're going to be making 4 of these Scrappy corner blocks for the border, and we're going to be making 36 of these, the square and a diamond and a square actually. And to do that, we're going to be creating diagonal rows, just short little diagonal rows to put those together so that we're not worrying about Y seams. And I'm going to show you how that's done. So the first thing that I would recommend that you do is make all of your diamond and a square units first. And mine are very scrappy. And I am using lots of different blues for the darks, that's the rectangle, and I'm using lots of different pinks for the mediums. And so it's just a very scrappy little unit. And then I'm using a variety of lights for these triangle pieces. These are the large triangles, and these are called the small triangles. And there are templates in PDF attached to the description box here with everything that you need. So you'll have the instructions as well as all of these templates. And for the templates, you can actually copy them onto some template film if you'd like to make the template and then trace them onto your fabrics, or you can trace them onto freezer paper and use that technique to create all of your triangles. So in the description box, make sure that you copy, print, or save the PDF for all of the templates. This is the large border triangle. There's the small border triangle. And if you look at your PDF of instructions, which you will also want to make sure you either print or save and download, this is the small border triangle that we need to cut 8 of them that look just like this, and then 8 of them in reverse. So if you'll see here, I've traced mine onto freezer paper, and I simply traced it so that I'm using the cutting line, which is the outside line for the tracing, and then placing it on my fabrics on the wrong side, and then tracing around this and then cutting them out. Now, since you need 8 of these that look just like this and 8 of these that are in reverse, if you just trace this small border triangle and then you place it on your light fabric, which I have done on these, and I'll show you more of these in a minute. But if you fold your light fabrics together and then just trace it on there, you'll actually get one right and one reverse with every tracing, because you've got your fabrics folded right sides together or wrong sides together, it doesn't matter. But as with every tracing, then you'll get one right side and one wrong side, or reverse, which is what you need. So you need a total of 8 of each of those. You're going to need to trace the square, diamond in the square unit. This is the dark rectangle, and these are the medium triangles that will be sewn around it. And then the last item here will be your corner block, and that's the simple little square. It's basically a square and a square unit, and there's 4 of those that you'll need to make a total of 4 of these units. So you can create all of your templates just using freezer paper. Most everybody has freezer paper in their kitchen, and you just simply draw on the paper side of the freezer paper. And you can actually even press it onto the right side of the fabric as you're tracing so it doesn't move. I didn't worry about that. It worked out well for me just to trace it. Or you can simply use a template film, and many quilters who do a lot of applique type quilting do have template film. It's a plastic film. You can buy it at Hobby Lobby. You can buy it at your quilt stores. You can buy it online, and it's another option for you. It's a more sturdy option when you're tracing your templates and then tracing them onto the fabric itself. So those are just some ideas for you there. So make sure you do print that out, and then of course you'll also want to be sure that you print out your part 3 instructions. So that is something that you'll want to have. Now the first thing that I would recommend you do is get all of your diamond and a square units put together, and mine are very scrappy. I've got darks for the center rectangles, those are various blues, and then all of these smaller triangles that are surrounding that rectangle are various pinks, so those are my mediums that I'm using. And I think the best thing to do would maybe just go ahead and make all 36 of these units and have them ready to go, because then as we are sewing our units together, we're going to start with an end unit, each end of the row, as you can see here. This end and this end and that end and that end and here and there and there and there. They all have to begin and end with these square off triangles. So these smaller border triangles will help to square off that end of the border. And then we're simply going to, I'm going to attach this one here, and I'll show all of this to you in a minute. We'll sew that one on, flip it up. Then we're going to sew these units together as a diagonal, and then that will be sewn to that unit, and we'll continue across until we're at our last diamond in a square unit where we finish it off with those smaller borders. So I will go through this process and show it to you. It's a very simple process once you understand the steps involved, and it's just something that I love to do, and I love to piece borders. You certainly don't have to piece your border for your mystery quilt. You can do anything that you're interested in for it, but I always like to at least teach a pieced border method for my mystery quilt classes. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you how to put these units together. And what I did was take the smaller units. I've got a variety of 4 different pink fabrics, and I'm just making sure I'm using all 4 of them on each one of these rectangles. But what I've done, first of all, is just put the small rectangle onto each end of that, the small diamonds, excuse me, onto each end of the rectangle. And then I pressed it toward the dark. And now that that's done, I'm going to take these longer triangles, and I'm simply going to pin that end there, pin this end over here, and take it to my sewing machine and sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance there along that area. Let's make sure you can see what I'm doing here. I think you can. Okay, here we go. So there's one side, and then I just finger press it open. And you'll notice that it's allowing a nice 1/4 inch seam allowance on both sides. We need that 1/4 inch seam allowance. That's very important. Now we're going to attach this one on this side. And again, I'll simply just pin. And you'll get to the point where you won't even be pinning. You'll just be sewing these. Okay, there we go. I'll be sewing that 1/4 inch seam allowance along that edge. Oops, my thread is caught up there. All right, so that's been sewn. The thread was caught. Now I'm going to press it up. So in the center, I had pressed them toward the dark, and on the long edges, I'm pressing it away from the dark. So there is my unit. I will get it pressed. So it's ready to be placed in here. Now, what I mentioned earlier is that we're going to be sewing in diagonal rows. So the first thing I'll need to do with this end unit is get it so I have a diagonal row, which means I'm going to need to attach this right here. And you have these little units. Let me see if I can share that with you on the page. It's easier to see. EQ8, when it prints these out, it has these little diagonal cuts on these ends, which help to line things up a little better. So we have some diagonal cuts there and there instead of it going to a perfect point. And that just helps you as you're lining up your seam allowances when you're piecing it together. And so I'm going to pin this one here Go over here and pin that one down there. And I am going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance from there down to there. So let me take it over here. Make sure everything is lined up properly. And there we have it sewn. I'm going to press it away from the diamond there, and there we have it. And that also allows you to have that 1/4 inch seam allowance, which is very important that you'll need that in order to sew this into the rest of the quilt. Okay, so now we have one diagonal unit ready there. And this is the end of the diagonal of the row itself. And now I'm going to create a diagonal unit here. I'm going to use the same technique where I'm going to pin this. And you'll notice that the diagonal cut there lines up beautifully there. And I'm going to come down here and do the same thing. Pin that. Now I'm going to take it to, you can see it a little bit better on this side. I'm going to take it over here and stitch that. All right, so that one was sewn, and I'm going to press it open. And for these units, I'm pressing it all away from the a diamond in a square unit. So I'm pressing them actually toward the light in this case. So now I have 2 diagonal units here that I can put together. As I'm creating, I'm building my border. As you can see, I'll move it down here a little bit farther. So I'm just continually building my border. So I'm going to continue making these units just like this and adding them until I have a total of 6 of those units. And then on the 6th one, we're going to finish it off on this side with 2 square small border units as well, or triangle units. So let me show you how this is put together. I'm simply going to flip it over and again line up. There is that cut off edge that just lines up very nicely. I want to get rid of some of these threads here. This is bugging me. And then I'm going to line this up with that edge. Now what I'm going to do is inside here, we're going to actually make an X. When we line this up, it's going to create an X in there when you line that up. Because they're both seams are on a diagonal, so therefore they're crossing one another like this. Normally the seam allowances would be together and you'd press them opposite, but these seams are going together at a crossing. So we've got that stitched or pinned, and now I'm going to stitch it. I'm lining these up properly. There we go. Let's see how I did. All right, so it is stitched. Flip it open. Excellent. Look at that. It turned out really well. I like that. So now we've put this diagonal section with this diagonal section, and the next thing we need to do is grab another triangle and finish off this diagonal section. It's not complete yet. It has to have the top. So we will pin this on here just like we did over there. Pin that on. Bring it down here. Whoops. Line up those cut sections so they match. And I'm going to bring it over here to the machine and start stitching. Okay, and press it back. So now we have a complete diagonal section right there. And I'm just finger pressing right now. You can certainly take this to the iron after each sewing, but I'm just finger pressing it. Now I'm going to create another diagonal section. And it will start with one of these units here and one of these units here. So we'll stitch this together, and once that's stitched together, then it's going to be stitched here, and then once that's done, again, we will need to add another triangle here to finish it off. So now I have 6 of these units, the diamond and a square units that are in this border with their corresponding light large triangles, and now I have to finish and square off the end of this border. And so what I'm going to do is take one of each of the smaller triangles, one is reversed, and sew those on. We'll simply sew them on the same fashion that we did with the other ones. 1/4 of an inch here, press it back, sew this here, 1/4 of an inch there. So let me show you how that's done. You'll notice there was excess bulk on the bottom side here, so I'm putting the bulkier seam allowance on the bottom so that the feed dogs will distribute it evenly across this 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to go ahead and start sewing. For some reason my thread keeps getting caught up there. There we go. And here we are. So that has finished off the edge, or the bottom edge of the unit. There's a nice 1/4 inch seam allowance there, and here, and here. That's necessary. So now I'm going to go ahead and take this to the iron and press everything. So here is my one border unit. There are 6 of these units in the border. I have these 2 ends finished off. One end and the other end. It's just kind of folded here for you because it's so long. And now I'm going to make a total of 4 of these units. On 2 of the units, we're going to square off each of them with our corner square blocks. And you have the templates for that as well. I have pinned the border to one side of my quilt. I've also, before that, I've attached a 1.5 inch wide inside border. I've done mine in dark navy blue here, all the way around the quilt, and now I'm attaching this first border, and then we'll continue attaching the borders around the quilt. The last 2 borders that I will be attaching on opposite sides will have the corner square units as well. So I have one of the borders attached here, and as I mentioned earlier, I first of all put the 1.5 inch wide dark border around here, and there is a corner square in each of those. And the PDF of instructions gives you the dimensions and the links, etc., that you need for all of that. So be sure to download that PDF, and here is the border. I'm going to take it over and press it. I'm going to press everything to the dark border. So as we put together the outside borders, I've got the 4 borders finished, and 2 of these borders will have these corner blocks attached. And the corner block is basically a square and a square. It's this picture right here. And I have a dark square in the middle with these small medium colored fabrics that will encircle it, and then the light fabrics that will encircle it. And so I'm simply going to start sewing these together by placing the triangle on top of the square and sewing a 1/4 inch seam allowance on each side, flipping them out, pressing them, and then doing the same with these. Pressing that unit and then doing the same with the lighter fabrics.